Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Coach's Corner on the Bridging Impact Podcast Network. This is Coach Furtado, where I share the wisdom and what I'm learning from the week as a young coach and as a young leader, as someone that just loves learning and loves absorbing, and making the most of the experiences I'm going through in life. And in life, there are oftentimes, times where we start new things, new chapters. And oftentimes in those new chapters are experiences where we feel like we don't belong, or we just aren't comfortable yet. And we question, like, are we really contributing? Can we really make an impact here? And if you ever felt like that, you're human, right? And I think that's part of the human experience. And it's really funny because I did an episode on imposter syndrome about 6 months back, and it's really funny how much I've grown from that experience. And so the other day I walked into a gym as my first time ever being an assistant on varsity, playing, like sitting on the bench and coaching on the bench. And it was just, I was in awe. I walked in and I saw grown men dunking. You know what I mean? And like, these are high schoolers, and I'm going, my initial thoughts are like, how can I coach these guys, right? Do I belong here, right? Like, I've been coaching youth basketball. I like mastered that for so long. Like, the mind is just being like, yeah, let's go live there. You're a great youth basketball coach, just stay there. But, I had to remind myself that, I've interviewed a lot of really wonderful, people here on the Bridging Impact podcast. And obviously, if you're listening to this right now, you're one of our listeners who are consistently listening to the amazing guests that we have on and really bridge the impact. And I've learned so much from them. I've learned so much from my experiences as a varsity basketball player, as someone who worked PGC basketball camps and went to the camp and just worked at other elite camps, worked with other great coaches. I've had the opportunity to be a sponge. And so, I think it was just really a true reflection of a true opportunity to really just be, like, let myself be in the moment and be uncomfortable, but also not let it affect me. And so I want to just talk about 4 different steps to navigate imposter syndrome that I have kind of cultivated and has worked for me. And obviously there will be some other steps that probably work for you, but I hope some of these will be helpful for you. And again, before we dive into that, I apologize. I'm recording this in my car, so if there's some sounds, I always do want to try and get the best audio quality, but the time is not of the most, I don't have a ton of time right now. I finally got approved. I'm subbing, then I coach. Now I'm getting drinks with a former colleague of mine, a coach of mine, and we're going to talk shop. So part of, being a content creator is going wherever, going with the flow. So with that being said, diving into the 4 steps of navigating imposter syndrome. Number 1 is just getting curious, right? It's kind of like what I was talking about earlier, is like asking myself, instead of just, because obviously you hear that voice in your head, right? And that's telling you like you don't belong here, right? And I think the number 1 thing to do actually is ask yourself, why don't you belong here? Like, why not me? And I think then getting curious, it's like, oh, these guys are more athletic than me. Okay, so what? Because these guys are more athletic than me, does that mean they are perfect players that are going to go straight to the NBA? Does that mean they don't need a coach who cares about them? Right? Like, you got to ask these different things. And I actually had an opportunity, get curious. And number 1, ask questions of friends, right? Like, I've reached out to Andy Baranilla, Coach Nilla, who was on the podcast before. And he's just like, yeah, man, like, I feel that, like, I had a similar feelings. And just know that, your life experiences and your grind and your basketball and your life, like, will help them, sharing those stories and being able to connect and relate to them. And, being a great coach, you don't have to be athletic to be a great coach. Look at a lot of the great coaches in the history of all sports, right? A lot of them aren't the best players. So just kind of understanding that and, making peace with that, and then, getting curious about it, and then asking, say, so what, right? So what? I may not be the best high school coach right now, right? Not yet. right? So saying so what, and just, again, asking questions and really challenging yourself internally, and having that, and being willing to have that dialogue. I think that's so incredibly important to, develop that relationship, not only with yourself, because in life we go through really challenging experiences, right? We all have different challenging experiences. I am actually fortunate to probably really be in a lot of situations where I haven't been challenged in certain ways of personal, but I mean, I've been challenged in sports where, I get cut from teams, I've, moving to Los Angeles, like that dialogue between yourself with imposter syndrome, I feel like is so important. Instead of like listening to yourself and being like, I suck, I don't belong here. Right. It's okay. Like, so what? So what that I may not be ready right now, but what does that mean? And that's the other thing, is like reflect. And I touched on it a little bit earlier, is going from so what to reflecting. And I know it kind of feels, kind of interesting to be like, so what is almost like a little bit of a futuristic question, but reflecting, like, it's an excellent time for when you are looking back at previous imposter syndrome, like I was talking about. So, like, I believe it was in March, I wrote that I was the head coach now for a gym for Royal Basketball School. And, by the time, like, I left Royal Basketball School, like, I had outgrown the position, right? Like, it wasn't, I had like mastered the position, and there was no more room for me to grow. So I moved on, right? And that was 6 months ago. I felt like I couldn't do that job at all. So it's like, it's really interesting to see how things come. And like, once I started thinking about that, I realized, like, I bet by the end of the high school season, I will feel very comfortable coaching elite athletes. And I'm very excited about that. And that's the really brilliant opportunity that new experiences allow. And that's what imposter syndrome allows. So I think imposter syndrome is actually a good thing, because if we're always going through life and feel confident and sure of it, we're in our comfort zone. And if we're feeling like imposters, right, then we're stretching our comfort zones, and we're going to end up growing. And that's how we become better people and better leaders and better coaches. So the last one is spring forward, right? So again, kind of what I'm talking about right now. Imagine, what is it going to be like in 6 months, 9 months, after this imposter syndrome kind of fades out? And it's an opportunity. Where will we be? How will we have grown? And it's going to be different than what we think about, because it's always different than what we think about. But it's those opportunities that really stretch us and help us get to where we want to go with the North Star, right? Like, for most of you listening, you probably know that I want to turn Bridging Impact into a basketball program here in Los Angeles to teach basketball and leadership skills. And honestly, that started with a podcast, and starting and getting out of my comfort zone and being like, okay, I want to talk about leadership with youth leaders and youth coaches, and ended up that, I actually am a pretty good coach, and, I'm loving it coaching at Venice, and, I'm utilizing substitute teaching to build connections here in Los Angeles. And so, yeah, I felt like an imposter last year when I was a substitute teacher. Yeah, I felt like an imposter the first time I was a basketball coach. Yeah, I felt like an imposter when I walked into that gym the other day. But it's an opportunity. And I feel like every challenge and every imposter syndrome feeling is an opportunity to grow. And so with that, I just implore you to ask, what have you been feeling uncomfortable about recently? And what can you kind of explore? And how can you use the framework of getting curious, asking so what, reflecting, and springing forward can do for you, and how you can really utilize your imposter syndrome to help you grow and make sure you bridge that impact to the people that you are working with. Because that's what it's all about. That's what Bridging Impact is about. We want to transform leaders through athletics, right? I have a vision that we will go beyond basketball, and that we will do workshops and really transforming leadership and passing that impact is the number one thing. Basketball is the vehicle for it. It's something that I love. It's something that, the people that are helping me out behind the scenes, that's what we love. And so I appreciate everyone for listening to this episode of the Coach's Corner podcast on imposter syndrome. And hey, if this resonated with you and you know this might help a friend, like, go send it to them. Like, and you know, if you love our message, like, this is how we grow. This is how we bridge the impact. We need people like you to share that out, because I love having people on and great guests, and you know, the more suggestions you can send me and all of that, like, I appreciate the community that's starting to grow, and I will feature you in our newsletter if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts, if you comment and leave, you know, some feedback anywhere, and you can tap in, you can connect with me on social media. I put all the links in the description. Appreciate you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Much love. Coach Furtado out.